Zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting in management accounting involves preparing the budget from the scratch with a zero base. It involves re-evaluating every line item of cash flow statement and justifying all the expenditure that is to be incurred by the department. It is a method of budgeting, whereby all the expenses for the new period are calculated on the basis of actual expenses that are to be incurred, and not on the incremental basis, which involves just increasing the expenses incurred in the previous year at some fixed rate. Zero-based budgeting lays emphasis on identifying a task and then funding these expenses irrespective of the current expenditure structure. Zero-based budgeting steps: identification of a task, finding ways and means of accomplishing the task, evaluating these solutions and also evaluating alternatives of sources of funds, setting the budgeted numbers and priorities. Let us take an example of a manufacturing department. Company ABC had spent $10 million last year. The problem is to budget the expenditure for the current year. There are multiple ways of doing so. 1. The board of directors of the company decides to increase or decrease the expenditure of the department by 10%. So the manufacturing department of ABC will get $11 million, or $9 million depending on the management's decision. 2. The senior management of the company may decide to give the department the same amount as it got in the previous year without hiring more people in the department, or increasing the production, etc. This way, the department ends up getting $10 million. Another way is, as against the traditional method, management may use zero-based budgeting, in which the previous year's number of $10 million is not used for calculation. Zero-based budgeting application involves calculating all the expenses of the department and justifying each of these. This reflects the actual requirement of the manufacturing department of Company ABC, which may be $10.6 million. Having understood zero-based budgeting calculation, some of the advantages and disadvantages of zero-based budgeting are stated below. Advantages are accuracy, efficiency, reduction in redundant activities, budget inflation, coordination, and communication. Disadvantages are time-consuming, high manpower requirement, lack of expertise. Advantages are accuracy, against the regular methods of budgeting that involve just making some arbitrary changes to the previous year's budget. Zero-based budgeting makes every department relook each and every item of the cash flow and compute their operation costs. This to some extent helps in cost reduction, as it gives a clear picture of costs against the desired performance. Efficiency: this helps in efficient allocation of resources, department-wise, as it does not look at the historical numbers but looks at the actual numbers. Reduction in redundant activities: it leads to the identification of opportunities and more cost-effective ways of doing things by removing all the unproductive or redundant activities. Budget inflation: since every line item is to be justified, zero-based budget overcomes the weakness of incremental budgeting of budget inflation. Coordination and communication: it also improves coordination and communication within the department and motivates employees by involving them in decision-making. Disadvantages of zero-based budgeting are time-consuming. Zero-based budgeting is a very time-intensive exercise for a company or a government-funded entries to do every year, as against incremental budgeting, which is a far easier method. High manpower requirement: making an entire budget from the scratch may require the involvement of a large number of employees. Many departments may not have an adequate time and human resource for the same. Lack of expertise: explaining every line item and every cost is a difficult task and requires training the managers. Conclusion: zero-based budgeting aims at reflecting true expenses to be incurred by a department or a state in the case of budget making by the government. Although time-consuming, this is a more appropriate way of budgeting. At the end of the day, it is a company's call as whether it wants to invest time and manpower in the budgeting exercise to provide more accurate numbers or go for an easier method of incremental budgeting. Thank you. Please subscribe, like, and share our video.